All right, man, peace. So, brothers, ever since the Los Angeles Clippers were able to acquire the services of Mr. Kawhi Leonard and trade for Paul George, the standout two-way small forward formerly of the Oklahoma City Thunder, there have been direct correlations and comparisons with the former Bulls tandem of Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, who we all know, or at least those of us who watched that era know. They pretty much are the standard for both offense and defense from a complementary pair of teammates who were wings on a championship-level squad. And that is what Kawhi Leonard and Paul George should be aspiring to be. They should be looking at that pair as a model of consistency for them to try to replicate. And there have been many NBA pundits, both on television and on social media, who have made those connections. From the moment that I saw them paired together, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, I even texted to brothers in my text thread that they reminded me a lot of Jordan and Pippen. It's something that's automatically going to resonate within the minds of anyone who watched Jordan and Pippen play in the 90s. And I think that the Clippers are going to try to embrace that same style. As we already saw in last season's NBA Finals, that 1990s style of play, of course with an updated version that accentuates three-point shooting, that can still win. A player who plays like Michael Jordan can still win in today's NBA game, no matter what many of the LeBron James fanboys in the media have tried to claim over the past 5 or 6 seasons. Now we're going to hear Shannon Sharpe, as usual, make a case that someone's better than Michael Jordan in something. Whenever he senses that he can make that claim, he's going to claim it. He's going to state that Kawhi Leonard, in his view, is a better defensive player than Michael Jordan. So, of course, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are forming one of the best 1-2 punches in the NBA right now. But can they become one of the best all time? The Washington Post spoke to several league execs and one said the Clippers will have a, quote, rare luxury of both players being able to defend their opponent's best player. One exec went so far as to make the bold statement, I'm not saying Kawhi Leonard is Michael Jordan, and I'm not saying Paul George is Scottie Pippen, but you have to go all the way back to those guys to find two perimeter players who can score the ball and hound their men like this.
Let me say this very quickly. When it comes to the comparison of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George to Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, it really is a great comparison. And just on paper, I would say that the Kawhi Leonard and Paul George tandem is better on both ends of the court, without a doubt in my mind, than the LeBron James and Dwayne Wade tandem. That would have been a great battle had we been able to see, say, the 2013 Miami Heat go up against this season's LA Clippers. Now, I don't want to speak too presumptuously because this LA Clippers tandem, they're going to have to win a couple of championships to just be compared to Dwayne Wade and LeBron James. But just on paper, based on what we've seen from Kawhi Leonard and Paul George over the last 6 or 7 seasons, I definitely would group them when it comes to both offensive and defensive proficiency with that LeBron James and Dwayne Wade pair. That would be a great matchup. And of course, they have a very long way to go to match Jordan and Pippen in accomplishments. But just looking at what they're capable of, I will say that it's not a bad comparison. Paul George is a better offensive player than Scottie Pippen all around. Much better three-point shooter. The defense is comparable. Contrary to what people tell you, Scottie Pippen was not someone who just locked down great scorers all the time. Great scorers are going to get their buckets. I've seen many games where Dominique Wilkins, Larry Bird played games with Scottie Pippen, just lit him up. Even James Worthy. So what a great defensive player does is he makes a great offensive player have to take more shots to get their points. But I've seen Scottie Pippen get lit up by a lot of guys, and he was a great defender. But to say that he's in a whole other stratosphere from Paul George, or that he's a better defender than even Michael Jordan was, that's just not true. Scottie Pippen's job was to hound the opposing team's best wing scorer and help Jordan save his energy for the offensive side of the court, because they counted on Jordan to give them 30 to 35 points a game, especially in the playoffs. So that's why Pippen was dispatched to guard the opposing team's best wing a lot of times. It wasn't because he was necessarily a better defender than Jordan.
It's a big statement. Share any truth to that?
Absolute truth. You have to go way back there to see two guys, Skip, on the wing that can play defense like Jordan and Pippen. And these two guys can do it. They can score the ball. I would give the slight nod as a defender to Kawhi over Jordan.
I wouldn't. I would say that it's probably about even, maybe even giving a slight edge to Michael. It's relatively close when we talk about on-ball defending. But once again, we have to take into account that Michael Jordan was the best defensive player at his position for about 13 years. And on top of that, he was expected to score 35 points a game, 30 to 35 points a game. He was expected to score in the regular season and the playoffs. That's a totally different standard from what we expect from Kawhi Leonard. Now, Kawhi was truly ethereal as a defensive player on the San Antonio Spurs. He was just great with the Toronto Raptors. Why is that? Because more was expected of him on the offensive end. So many times we saw the defensive matchup against the opposing team's best player sometimes go to Siakam. Now, we also know that Kawhi would take on that challenge as well. So I'm not going to try to diminish his defensive accomplishments. But as more is asked of you offensively, you are going to have to share the defensive load with another player, which is exactly the reason why Kawhi Leonard wanted to have Paul George on the team in the first place. Now, he was searching for other players. He was trying to team up with KD, supposedly. He was trying to team up with James Harden, potentially. Why is that? Because if you are able to team up with a James Harden, now you can let James score a lot of the points and you can guard the opposing team's best player. If you bring on Paul George, you can let Paul George guard the opposing team's best player and you can score more. But Kawhi already understands, even at just 27 going on 28 years old, he can't go all out on both offense and defense. It's going to tax him too much, especially if he expects to make a long playoff run. But just to get back to Shannon's statement, is Kawhi Leonard a better defensive player than Michael Jordan? No, I wouldn't say that. Certain people will say, well, what are you talking about? Kawhi Leonard has 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards. Michael Jordan only has 1. Well, let's compare what Kawhi Leonard's offensive numbers were in the years that he won Defensive Player of the Year to what Michael Jordan's numbers were on defense and offense. When Michael Jordan won Defensive Player of the Year, he averaged 35 points a game and shot 54% from the field. And on defense, he had over 200 steals and 100 blocks. I'm not quite sure if Kawhi Leonard has done either one of those things in his career. Now, he's more of a lockdown defender. He's going to stop his man from getting off good shots and penetrating. So he might not have many of those more quantifiable defensive stats. But Jordan was a lockdown defender, and he had those quantifiable defensive stats.
Give the slight nod to Pip over Paul George. I just believe of those 4, Pip and Kawhi are the better of the defenders. But
I'll say this. Paul George is much closer to Scottie Pippen defensively than Scottie Pippen is to Paul George offensively.
Absolutely right, Skip. And then when you throw in Pat Bev on the ball, like you would throw in Ron Harper on the ball, now you see what you're up against. And let's just say when they played the Lakers,
Ron Harper was longer than Patrick Beverley. Patrick Beverley is more of a nuisance. Ron Harper really could lock people down. When the Bulls in the late 90s decided that they were going to try to lock you down, I've seen games. For those of you brothers out there who've never seen the game, go back and look at the highlight of Game 2 of the 1996 Eastern Conference Finals between the Bulls and the Orlando Magic. I'll never forget it, watching the game live. The Bulls were down by almost 20 points, and they played the most hellacious defense in the second half that I've ever seen a team play. It was unbelievable.
Paul George, LeBron James plays 35, 36 minutes. There's a great chance that for 34 of those minutes, he's going to see Kawhi Leonard or he's going to see Paul George.
And you better hope that the Clippers are not able to sign Andre Iguodala. Because if the Clippers get Iguodala, the Lakers can forget it.
Okay, Jimmy Butler, you're going to see for 35, 38 minutes, you're going to see one of those 2 guys. Giannis Antetokounmpo, Greek Freak, that's what you're going to see. And that's what they can trot out there. Now, more times than not, Paul George will have to go it alone because we know Kawhi is going to be on a management scale. So he's probably...
Not necessarily. A lot of what Kawhi did back with the Toronto Raptors was based on the condition of the quadriceps injury that he sustained while with the Spurs. I do not expect Kawhi Leonard to miss 20 games this year for load management with the Clippers. I would expect him to play somewhere around 70 games.
Miss somewhere between 15 and 20 games. You understand that?
30, 40.
Stop it, Skip. See, there you go with the exaggeration. But when they're playing and they're both on the court, Skip, when they get engaged, they're as good as we have at the wing defender. And that anonymous exec is exactly correct, Skip. These guys are special. They're elite. They can hound you from 94 feet. They can challenge you at the rim. They can guard 1 through 4.
Injuries and overall team health are going to be an issue for the LA Clippers this year, though. We know that both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George do have an issue of sustaining injuries over the course of the regular season. So they're going to have to maintain a certain level of health over the course of this year.
They're special. And he's absolutely right. This is the best duo of wing defenders we've seen in 20 years. You got to go back to Jordan and Pip. And these guys, maybe not quite there, but maybe
It's close, though. Defensively, it's close.
below, but they're as good as we have in the NBA right now.
You know, you had me for a while.
Man, go ahead.
Make decent points, and all of a sudden you went completely over the edge.
What?
And forgive him, Father, he knows not what he said.
Shannon knew what he was doing when he made that statement. Shannon's one of these guys that wherever he can nitpick Jordan, he's going to try to do it, just to get a reaction or a response. That's how he builds up his profile.
What did I say?
Forgive me. I forgive you.
What did I say? What did I say that was so wrong?
I give a slight edge to number 2 over Michael Jordan
Yeah.
as a defender.
Yeah.
You cannot say that.
I just
You
said
have
it.
no idea what you're talking
I do,
about.
absolutely I do.
I was there every.
I'll say this. It's relatively close. And Jordan was a non-parole defender. But Kawhi Leonard is also a relatively non-parole defender. And he might have a bit more strength than Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was extremely strong, especially for his stature. Robert Horry's on record as stating that Michael Jordan is the strongest person, pound for pound, that he ever encountered in the NBA. That's according to Robert Horry. Kawhi Leonard also is extremely, extremely strong. The difference is that Michael's constitution, his physical constitution, was better than Kawhi's. He didn't break down like Kawhi Leonard does. What I will say is this. When Kawhi's on the floor, he can legitimately guard 4 positions, and he can shut down 2 positions, that being the 3 spot and the 2 spot. If you put him on the 4-man, he can hold him down as long as you're able to build a great wall of support around him like Toronto was last year when he guarded Giannis, because he has great feet. Kawhi has great defensive footwork. So he's able to stop offensive players from getting to the spot where they want to get to. But he could legit shut down 2 positions. We do know this. Kawhi cannot guard Kevin Durant. KD came out in Game 5 of last year's finals, and he was pulling up with no problem over Kawhi. There's just certain players that you're not going to be able to guard. But there is a comparison, no doubt about it, between Kawhi and Michael Jordan. Now, in the 90s, the Bulls had definitely the 2 best defensive players at their positions in Jordan and Pippen, and arguably the 2 best defensive players in the NBA, with honorable mention to the great Gary Payton and also the great Hakeem Olajuwon.
In 1998, covering the last Bulls run, Michael Jordan was an absolute terror on defense. He terrified people. They would turn the ball over. They just throw it out of bounds when he started to attack because they didn't want any part of it. He intimidated the opposition on defense as much as he did on offense. He was first team all defense at age 34.
Actually, Jordan's last season was age 35. He started out at 34 years old, but I believe his birthday is in February. So he was 35 by the end of the season. To Skip Bayless's point, though, yes, Jordan, I believe, was top 5 in the NBA or top 3 in the NBA in overall defensive efficiency as a shooting guard. So he was as impactful as a Dikembe Mutombo, so on and so forth, that last season with the Chicago Bulls on defense. And that's with Pippen missing most of that season.
Here in Chicago, I'm sorry, this guy has never been able to carry his jockstrap.
Hold on. So what am I supposed to do about these 2 defensive players of the year back to back?
Okay, well, it's because competition.
Don't do that, CJ. You can see it.
No, you just can't say competition, Skip Bayless. Kawhi Leonard is an exceptional, incredible, historic defensive player, but so is Michael Jordan. The best way to argue that is that less was expected of Kawhi on the offensive end, so he could fully hone in and concentrate on defense. And besides that, Jordan was probably robbed of a Defensive Player of the Year award in 1987. In 1988, Michael Jordan won the Defensive Player of the Year award because he had over 200 steals, over 100 blocks, and he had a very high defensive efficiency rating guarding his man. But he did basically the same thing in 1987. And they didn't give him the Defensive Player of the Year award. I believe they gave it to Michael Cooper. I'm trying to remember who won the Defensive Player of the Year in 1987. It was either Michael Cooper or Alvin Robertson. One of you brothers could look that up. I'm not quite sure. But Jordan easily could have won the Defensive Player of the Year award in back-to-back seasons himself. Because in 1987, he became the first player, at least as long as they were tracking those stats, to have over 200 steals and 100 blocks in the same season. And he was a guard. He did that, and he got very low recognition on a league-wide scale, meaning the Defensive Player of the Year award that he should have won, he didn't get it. probably because they thought that they were going to be giving him too much too early or too fast. So he won that accolade the next season for doing the same thing. Kawhi, great defensive player, but the Spurs were not asking him to do anywhere near as much defensively as the Bulls asked from Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan in the late 80s, he basically had to guard his man, help Dave Corzine guard the center, give Steve Coulter and Sam Vincent help guard the point guard, and help Charles Oakley guard the power forward. He was trying to help everybody and guard his own man.
Why you do that, Skip?
Because I'm just doing it because it's God's truth. Forgive him.
Okay.
Okay.
But see, I remember.
You didn't forgive him.
I remember when number 2 Kawhi was at the Spurs.
Yeah.
Oh, he's the best two-way player. He plays defense. He played great defense. Now he'll abandon your team.
Was Jordan still playing in the league at that point?
I'm just saying the praise that you had heaped on Kawhi for being such a great
Hey,
defender.
I do. I give him high credit, high marks, except you went completely over the edge.
No.
Well, we know that's what Shannon's going to do. Once again, Shannon is desperate to figure out a way to amplify the profile of his boothang LeBron James, and that means that he has to diminish Michael Jordan. That in and of itself is proof that they understand that LeBron James has not accomplished enough overall as a player to even be considered as the greatest NBA player of all time by an objective observer. The only way that you could put LeBron James at the top with a clear conscience is if you buy into narratives, especially super liberal narratives, and you're willing to shower him with effusive praise that's going to cater to that concept of a cult of personality, which is so much of what the LeBron James phenomenon is built on. They've been promoting the cult of personality around LeBron James since 2002.
The slight edge.
I would, Skip.
What?
Skip.
Oh my God.
Skip, the guy has almost an 8-foot wingspan. The hands the size of a first baseman's mitt.
Jordan had the same things.
There's nothing he can skip. He look. Why is it every time if somebody says something, oh, I can't believe it's sacrilegious, it's blasphemy for you to say somebody is better at something than Michael Jordan? Oh.
I don't think that it's quote-unquote blasphemous. I just think that you have to have qualifiable and quantifiable data. And I don't think that you have either one. But I will say this. It is a conversation. If someone were to say, I would take Kawhi Leonard over Michael Jordan on defense, it's not something that's ridiculous. But to just say it matter-of-factly, well, you know, Kawhi Leonard's better than Michael Jordan defensively, there has to be a discussion there. You have to prove that. I definitely would not go as far as Skip Bayless, but I do think that context matters.
Hey, Skip, somebody can be better at something than Michael Jordan. I'm not saying he's a better.
I agree with that. Larry Bird had a higher basketball IQ than Michael Jordan had. Magic Johnson made his teammates better to a far higher degree than Michael Jordan did. There have certainly been other great players who brought certain things to the table, certain intangibles or tangibles that Jordan didn't bring. But once again, the reason why so many people call Michael Jordan the greatest player ever is the full package of everything that he brought to the table. Not just the quote-unquote swag and the pop appeal, but also how much he was able to excel on offense and defense, how he was able to change the winning paradigm in the NBA. Prior to Michael Jordan, the assumption was that you needed a great big man and a great wing in order to win championships. That pretty much was the formula for winning championships. There had never been a player that had a shooting guard that led the team in scoring, not just led the team in scoring, but led the league in scoring, win multiple NBA championships like that. That was not the way to win. And since Jordan, the paradigm for winning championships in the league pretty much has completely changed. Now, you still have teams that are dominated by big men who win championships. We've seen it with the Rockets with Hakeem. We've seen it with the Lakers with Shaquille. We saw it with the Spurs with David Robinson and Tim Duncan. So we've still seen that same old paradigm work. But Jordan is the reason why a Kobe Bryant, a LeBron James can know that they can lead their team in scoring and win a championship. They're the ones who understand that, and it's because of Michael Jordan. So that's why he's considered the greatest player ever, and also the way that he was able to link the NBA world with the corporate world. That's the reason why so many of the NBA players that people love so much today can act woke and get on social media and talk shit about topics that they have no understanding of and know that they don't have much to lose because they're making more money off the court than on the court. They have to thank Michael Jordan for that.
Overall player, but I believe at the defensive end that he's slightly above. Now, Pip, I believe Pippen might be the greatest on-ball defender we've seen. because he could guard one through four, Skip. He'd take the point guard, be it John Stockton, Magic Johnson, Kevin Johnson, or then he'll go get your three. Or he could take, now he's a little light in the pocket, but he was so quick, he can move so well laterally. That's what made them so tough. And then when they got Dennis Rodman was a defensive player of the year 2 times. He was an all-defensive player.
That's very true, but by the time the Bulls got Dennis Rodman and he was playing power forward, he was nowhere near the defender that he was with the Detroit Pistons or with the San Antonio Spurs. He was still very good, and when he wanted to, he could do a great job, especially as a post defender. Dennis Rodman really could frustrate post players and big men because Dennis was so strong with his lower body. Shaquille O'Neal could not back down Dennis Rodman. He could back down everyone else except for Dennis Rodman because Rodman was so strong, especially with his lower body.
Get Ron Harper on the ball. You get those 2 wings, and then you got Rodman backing you up. That's what the Clippers possess.
I'm going to give you this. This group is Jordan-esque, Bulls-esque across that front line of defense. I'm talking about the half-court line.
Right.
Because I covered the 1998 Bulls, and opponent after opponent, when I went to the visiting locker room, all I ever heard was we couldn't get the ball past half court because Pippen is so long, and Jordan is so long, and Ron Harper is so long. I don't know what was Harper, like 6'7" or 8 tall.
Ron Harper was about 6'6". He was the same height as Michael Jordan. Very long arms, though.
But really long arm. And when they stretched, there's nowhere to go. And they could jump and double the ball handler at any point to where he's just suffocated.
Right.
The first three-peat Bulls team, they basically had a defensive coordinator coach named Johnny Bach. And Johnny Bach would call Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen the Dobermans. He would say, let's play the Doberman defense, which basically means that they would press the ball handler bringing the ball up. And they would force so many turnovers, especially in that 1991 title run. Their defense was incredible. That's one of the most underrated teams in the history of the NBA. The 1991 Chicago Bulls, that first Bulls team to win a championship. Their defense, when they put that press on teams, there was nothing that they could do.
He is going to spit it up and turn it over.
They did a great job, Skip, of forcing you to. They tried to keep you out in the middle of the court. What they tried to do is force you into an angle to a court.
Absolutely. They want to force you to the sideline. And if they force you to the sideline, then they would trap you, either with Jordan and Pippen or Pippen and Grant. And it would cause so many turnovers.
And then here come the guy from the backside. As soon as you pivot,
okay,
he done picked you.
And then Zubats, a guy you love that they just gave away for Mike Muscala. He's now, I think he's still in OKC.
Yes.
I don't know if that's going to stick, but he's still there. That's where he wound up. You gave away Big Zoo, who became a top 5 rim protector last year statistically.
Yes.
So is he Luke Longley, who was the starting center?
Yeah,
for the
at least.
He's at least there.
Yeah.
So you got that. And then who's your Rodman? Well, once Montrez comes on the floor, he is Rodman-esque to me.
That's interesting because the first person that I've ever heard or that I ever heard make that comparison was Stephen A. Smith. He said that Montrezl Harrell reminded him a lot of Dennis Rodman. He said that last year. So I think that this Clippers team, they have the potential to be very special.
That he packs a wallop. He's 6'8", 240, maybe,
yes.
I don't know, he might be 250, somewhere in there. So he is a very physical, attitudinal defender where he just snarls and attacks.
We pound him inside.
Yeah. Okay.
What we do have is 6'10.5" Anthony Davis. They have no answer for that. And don't let Boogie. Don't let Boogie get to 85, 90%. Because at 6'11", 250, punish him, Big Zoo. And
I don't think that anybody's worried about Boogie Cousins because Boogie Cousins is a volume shooter. He's 6'10", 6'11", as you state. And I don't think that he's ever shot 50%. If I'm wrong about that, one of you brothers can correct me. But I think that Boogie Cousins is going to be a much bigger liability than he is an asset, especially come playoff time when he makes a lot of emotional decisions and plays a lot of poor defense.
Zoo, but Boogie gonna punish. So we're punishing. So how you want to do this, Skip?
Big Zoo is not afraid of
We don't want him to be afraid. Take it.
I love all these Euro kids. They just come over here like, I don't care. I ain't afraid.
I love it.
I ain't afraid of no wolf. No.
Well, I will say this. A lot of the younger European players, they're definitely a lot less fearful than the European players were who came over to the NBA back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. That's for sure.
On.
But look, that's as good as do in the last 20 years.
Okay. All right. So the other quote in this same article that I loved was, the whole idea of, this is from an anonymous coach, NBA coaches said it would be hard to drive a wedge between number 2 and Paul George. I don't see how number 2, I don't see him caring if Paul is more famous. I don't see Paul caring if number 2 is the closer, to be honest. I think Patrick Beverley is the alpha dog in that locker room. Well, I didn't mention Patrick.
Well, I'm not quite sure if you mean personality-wise or leadership-wise. I think that Patrick Beverley is going to be smart enough to understand that Kawhi Leonard leads with actions. Kawhi's not going to come into a locker room trying to bogart the locker room. He's going to come in with the esteem that other players are going to appreciate what he brings to the table, and they're not going to try to step on his toes. Kawhi's never carried himself like someone who walks into a room and expects everybody to just bow down at his feet. He knows that he's created enough of a resume for himself that people know what he can do. And he'll allow Patrick Beverley to verbally run the locker room. He doesn't care about that. But what Kawhi knows is that down the stretch of the game, you better give him the damn ball. And that's something that the Clippers are going to have an advantage over other teams with. They're going to have 3 players on their squad who can carry a team in the latter part of the fourth quarter. Not just with Kawhi and Paul George, but also with Lou Williams.
In that front line of defense.
On ball.
But if he's the on ball, if he's in the middle and you got those 2 wings, he is obviously as tenacious a bulldog of a defender as we have in the league right now.
He's Ron Harper.
Okay, he not in stature, not in length, but in tenacity, just in attitude.
Right.
He is definitely Ron Harper. He might even be a tick above Ron Harper, and I'm not going to get struck by lightning saying that. I know what I'm talking about. I covered the other team.
Ron Harper was an exceptional defender, though. Ron Harper was the guy who they would put on Reggie Miller a lot of times. He was the person that Phil Jackson would have try to guard many of these players, especially 2 men or 1 man, who like to do a lot of running around. Ron was that guy. Sometimes he would guard John Stockton. If they played against Indiana, sometimes they put him on Reggie Miller. Now, if it was a regular season situation and Michael Jordan wanted to challenge himself, if it was a player that Michael viewed as a rival, like a Mitch Richmond, then Michael would guard Mitch, and he would just let Ron Harper go guard the point guard. But in the playoffs, when you needed Michael to have a conservation of energy, especially for down the stretch, when you needed him to score, they put Ron Harper on the opposing team's scorer, especially at 2 guard. They let Michael guard the 3, and sometimes they would let Scottie guard the point guard, especially if the 3-man was not a huge threat. Like in that Pacers series, Michael guarded Chris Mullin.
I'll take Patrick Beverley slightly over Ron Harper. So he upgrades this. He also brings some intangibles that the 2 wing guys don't bring. Because the 2 wing guys, intangibly, I don't trust either one of them in the biggest moments. But I do trust Patrick Beverley. And I do believe he is the alpha, along with Lou Williams in that locker room.
Pat Bev ain't taking no last shot. That's going to be Kawhi, Paul, PG.
But it's the attitude he brings, the guts of the team. Heart and soul of the team are those 2 guys, Patrick Beverley and Lou Williams.
Well, I agree to a certain extent, Skip. I think the fact that Paul George spent a year and a half in OKC when Russell was clearly the big fish. But
yeah, that man spent a year and a half in a federal prison located in Oklahoma City. West Brick Penitentiary.
Conceded some of that last year. Hence, that's why Paul George was able to have career highs in rebounds and points. Kawhi, now, we keep thinking Kawhi this mild-mannered because he doesn't say anything. But when you see yourself as a top dog, everybody keep telling you the king. It's hard for you to be the king and say, yo, I'm cool with everything that's going on. Now, the king, that's your castle. You need to know what's going on. So you need to be the big dog. Not
Kawhi's going to speak when he needs to, not when he wants to.
Only slightly big dog. But you want to be you the big fish because remember, you made this happen. A guy that makes things happen all of a sudden is not willing to concede. Said, "Oh, okay, I'm good." But don't I don't care who they got. They taking the L's, and I just want you.
Shannon is so scared. As soon as he found out Kawhi was going to the Clippers, he just got so scared. And then on top of that, they got Paul George. Oh man.
For Cribble, all I want is the Lakers.
Did this brother just say for Cribble? For Cribble?
The Clippers on Cribble Day.
You realize that's just one of 82.
I don't care. Because that's going to set the season.
For Christmas, all I want are Lakers, Clippers in, I don't know, the conference semis. Or
I love that.
I'll take them in the conference finals.
You know, I love the conference finals because you know what that means, Skip Bayless? The Lakers got all home games. We ain't leaving. We all home. For some, if need be, 7 games. But it probably end in 4, 5.
The league would love that. To get a Clippers, Lakers, Western Conference Finals, they would love that. But I just don't think that there's going to be a matchup that the league wouldn't like as long as they either have the Lakers or the Clippers in the Western Conference Finals. If they can get any permutation of the Lakers or Clippers squaring off against the Warriors, the Nuggets, or the Rockets, or even the Jazz, but most of those first 3 teams, I don't think that they would mind. The problem would be that that LA team would have to win. They would have to win. Other than maybe against Golden State or the Rockets. Because if they don't, then the NBA Finals will not have as much star power as they would want. So they really only want 1 of 4 teams coming out of the West this year. The 2 LA teams, maybe Golden State, and the Rockets. Anything other than that is going to hurt their ratings.
I would love that because that would be the end of LeBron's run.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
We're just getting started.
Skip Bayless, I have news for you. The end of LeBron's run was that championship in 2016. I just don't think that people are going to realize it until his career is over. If I'm wrong about that, I'm wrong. But I just don't see him winning another championship. And I've already done a video stating that this year is LeBron's championship window, this season. We'll see whether or not I'm right or I'm wrong.
So this Clippers team is very interesting because it's deeper than you think it is. Because remember, Lou and Montrez come off the bench,
Right.
and Lou will take the last shot and
Yeah.
often makes the last shot, right?
Yeah.
So that gives a big advantage to Clippers over Lakers, right?
No.
Interesting. So who's the better defensive team? We
Oh,
have
you
to start with that.
guys are the better defensive team. We're not.
By far. It's not even going to be close.
You guys.
Who's the better closer?
Oh, Bron.
Braun over Lou?
Yeah.
Braun, the worst free throw shooter late game in
We
the
don't get
history
to
of
this. We
basketball.
don't need free throw.
LeBron James is going to be a better closer than Lou Williams, Skip Bayless. But I will say this. Lou Williams is going to be a very good closer for the Clippers. And they have 3 potential closers, which is the better conversation. Because the Lakers are only going to have 1 closer. Anthony Davis is not a closer. Anthony Davis is not even an alpha, as talented as he is.
Oh, you
We don't need a free throw. No.
Okay. The same
Remember, AD was not even the closer in New Orleans. The closer in New Orleans was Drew Holiday.
left, 8 games on the table before Christmas Day when they were 20-14 and the 4 seed, and they could have been the 2 or even the 1 seed
That's
if he
right.
closed the deal.
See, LeBron is like me. See, LeBron don't need no free throws because he gonna finish it. Gonna finish it from the floor. I don't carry credit cards. Just straight cash on me.
Really?
Damn.
Was he straight cash homie against the Rockets and the Spurs in those first
right.
2 games at home? Do you remember those games? Do you
Yes,
remember all
I
the free throws missed? Do you remember the
He
big
mi-
3 he
yeah.
missed against the Spurs?
He missed a free throw. He missed 2 free throws that would have iced the game.
Yeah.
You made that abundantly clear.
I have.
It happened. Michael Jordan missed a free throw. Kobe's missed free throws. Yeah. Okay.
There's video of Larry Bird missing 2 clutch free throws down the stretch of a game against the Philadelphia 76ers, I believe in 1985 or 86. Probably like 86. And Dr. J hits a miracle shot to win it. And it's so funny. Bird misses the 2 free throws and he goes back to the bench shaking his head. He can't believe it.
Jokic number 2 missed a free throw. You remember in Miami? Even Manu missed the greatest closer ever. Manu Ginobili missed a free throw.
That was with 4 minutes left. Didn't really matter.
Oh, it didn't matter. Huh?
That was nightmarish, man. I'll never forget watching that game. Game 6 between the Miami Heat and the Spurs. And I was actually rooting for the Heat to win that game because I wanted to see a 7-game series. And I actually was hoping to see the Heat win another championship because I didn't like how the media was treating LeBron after he left Cleveland. And when down the stretch of that game, I was just shaking my head like, wow, LeBron is going to get killed by the media tomorrow if they lose this game. Because the way he was turning the basketball over, and all of a sudden, with about 5 minutes left, it was just the most unbelievable turn of events that I've ever seen. First off, the fourth quarter, LeBron had no headband on, so he just didn't give a shit at that point. And then down the stretch of the fourth quarter, the Heat played so hard, and the Spurs played so dumb, that the combination of those 2 elements made for one of the greatest finishes in NBA history. That was the best game of that season, and Game 6 of the 2013 NBA Finals is one of the great playoff games ever played.
The other one was with 18 seconds left.
but those guys are a little bit, slightly bigger. I mean, I didn't realize Paul George was as big as he was. Paul George 6'9".
Yeah, he's about 6'8", 6'9".
I was thinking he was 6'8".
No, he's 6'9". They listed him as 6'9". Kawhi 6'7". Okay. But I mean, you can see Skip, bit long, the angular.
Yep.
Kawhi got a little bit more beef than Jordan, those shoulders.
Yeah.
But he can't, but that's 6'9" from Akron. We back him down.
Yeah.
Back him down and do what he wants.
That's going to be a great battle. LeBron versus Kawhi.
All I know is that, number two, if you look hard at the fourth quarters of the playoffs, I dare anybody to go look at them. Just break them in, break them out, and then start checking off, see what he did in the fourth quarters, and tell me that was Jordan-esque. Please tell me, because you won't.
No. Skip, we guys said now. We're not talking about from an offensive end perspective.
Yep.
We're talking about strictly defensive.
Okay.
And LeBron gonna ride Paul George. You remember what I did to you?
Well, I think that the comparison really is about the two-way aspect, because that's what the comparison is. Jordan and Pippen, Kawhi and Paul George, both being great two-way wings.
I made you leave the East.
Okay. We'll see. He's got a lot of help now.
We got a lot of help too.
Okay.
AD. All the defense. Is Pat Beverly gonna guard AD? Or is it gonna be Kawhi or Paul George or Montrez? Oh, who gonna guard Boogie? Cause Boogie gonna give it to somebody.
Well, who was guarding AD all those years in New Orleans when he was 34 games under 500?
Thank you, Skip Bayless.
I don't know.
Well, who was doing all that defense that Paul George, when LeBron was averaging 40 in the playoffs against Paul George? Who was he guarding then? LeBron, and was cooking it.
No, that wasn't Paul George. That was George Paul.
Yeah, exactly.
That one here, guys. 6 rings for Pippen and Jordan. Quite the legacy to live up to.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. We'll see how things go this season with the LA Clippers. I do think that their tandem of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are capable of great things. Will they ever be Jordan and Pippen? Most likely not, but let's keep one thing in mind. Michael Jordan did not win his first championship until he was 28 years of age. Kawhi Leonard is turning 28 this year. So we'll see. Peace.